Ken.
Thank you very much, and Charlie, good job putting this panel together, and just our staff. I'm very proud to be. It's a wonderful, wonderful group. I guess my thesis is that the skill set need for diplomats in the future will have very little to do with the skill set of diplomats in the past. In the past, you wanted people who did several things. Number one is figured out the politics in another country, okay? What's going on there? What's happening? Now, you need some of that, but you can get a lot of that from The Economist. You can get a lot of that from, private consultants who do this all the time. You get a lot of that from just good newspaper who are there on the scenes. Secondly, you want somebody to influence policy back in your home territory. That's always, I think, often been oversold because the assistant secretaries in our case and others, there's so many people in the Policy Act that, at least in the form of the U.S. government, it's awfully hard to decide who makes U.S. policy at any one time. But I think it's safe to say that very rarely does an ambassador on the scene make that policy. So that's diminished, if not out the window. Third is the inside group, and that is foreign minister to foreign minister, the inside the government, which was the biggest occupation of diplomats before. A lot of the issues they talk about now are issues that, are going to be given over to other institutions in the country and aren't going to be decided so quietly through quiet diplomacy and worked out. So what is the role of the diplomat, Gideon, to answer your question? I think the role of the diplomat increasingly is a public explainer of the policies of his country or her country. And what that means is the skill set you need is somebody who can understand where, in our case, the President and Secretary of State, the reasons for the policy, to go and hold constant salons in the embassy, in the residence, to meet the press all the time, to, as Paula says, use the social media right now, but to go and defend the policy no matter how controversial it is. My experience back in the time of the Ford and then the Reagan administration was that U.S. ambassadors were either out there apologizing for the United States policy, saying, those guys back home are doing all these crazy things, and kind of eye-rolling with their friends abroad, or had really no idea about the U.S. policy to any extent in order to defend it. And we're certainly, thirdly, we're scared stiff to go on the air and to give a speech because they could say something wrong. So what is for this new, if I'm right, and what is the new paradigm here? New paradigm is that you get rid of this idea, oh, he's so or she's so diplomatic, meaning discreet, meaning understated, meaning very quiet.
No one ever accused you of being discreet, understated, or quiet.
That's right. and so you're not going to treasure those in a diplomat. You're going to treasure somebody who can explain policy, who can argue with the best, who is unafraid of contending, even if a policy is very, very controversial, like entering the Iraq in 2003, and go out there and slug it out. And just get on French TV in this case and say, I understand our countries have the opposite view on this, but let me tell you our view. And just make that constant kind of plugging out there to try to persuade people at least of the reasons for the policy. Now that takes a very different set, and it may take a very different training. And it may mean more political appointees as diplomats, because these are people who are dealing with the press all the time. These are people who are dealing with the public all the time. These are people who are, public individuals out there and not very discreet, not very careful. It also takes, the last point I would make, it takes a certain allowance of mistakes, because if you're on the air all the time, you end up saying stupid things occasionally, okay? And so you cannot have a lot of slapping at the foreheads back in the home capital for every little thing you say that's a little different from the policy of the home country. So I see public diplomats in the future being very public and very undiplomatic.
Well, thank you, Ken. Frank.